let's say we all agree that this decentralization is a good thing on a local level. Sure, I'm 100% with you. There is one other problem, though, which is the military problem. If we're talking about having gaps of power that other countries like China or like Russia could take advantage of in order to take more territory and incorporate other people, unwilling people, into their grasp, then sure, like America could say, you know what, we're just gonna get rid of like all these structures and everybody's just gonna do their own thing in their decentralized community. But then what is going to happen to this kind of like backbone of, and sure, you could say military industrial complex, all this horrible stuff, whatever, but still, like, would that be a problem as far as other countries coming into that gap of power should everything become decentralized?
Well, empires don't win wars all the time. You guys just lost in Vietnam and you lost in Afghanistan again. Like Marx said, the first time was the tragedy, the second time was the farce. I mean, you're leaving Afghanistan and you're leaving it to the Taliban's. That's the limit of American military power. So
to be fair, though, did we leave it because we were totally outnumbered, or did we decide, by we, I mean the U.S., did the U.S. decide, okay, we've had enough of this and let's go home?
You left because you cannot afford to have a single dead American in the American media because you don't want to die any longer. You don't have any ideals in America. You don't want to die. And because you don't want to die, you can't win wars. That's exactly why you should watch the Pacific today as a nostalgic idea of what America used to be in 1944, and it no longer is. Because the Pacific today would be impossible for Americans. You're just too decadent now.
So if a country, for example, was to take over some other country, will you think America would sit there and not really do anything and not bother with it? I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Well, Trump certainly didn't get involved with anybody. Obama hardly did. You're basically picking presidents these days that will not get involved in foreign wars. Yes.
Interesting.
We're now looking at the nightmare that China might take Taiwan over the next 4 years and Biden might not do anything about it.
But what about all the bases that we have everywhere? Don't those count for anything at all?
You close them down all the time and you go home.
Oh, we still have that one in Germany. We have
well, I think Kuwait are very active. I think we have the most American military bases out of any country.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes, you do. Yeah, but you can invade Iraq because it's flat, right? But you cannot invade a mountainous country and win a war because it takes guerrilla warfare. Even with the drones, you can't win that war. You would have won Afghanistan if you could, but you got to be out. And you're out of Iraq. America is just leaving Iraq completely to the Iranians. You lost that war utterly at enormous costs. It was just a Halliburton war, but it wasn't a war that America was set to win. And that was even the war you should have won because it's just flat desert to conquer.
So would winning the war then be, this is actually something I brought up yesterday, Afina, you remember you were there, I brought this up about what if America were to, instead of the blunders that we had, where we gave money to, certain fighters versus other ones, certain tribes versus the others, instead of that, what if we would have continued the tradition of, 2,000 years and just gone full Imperium mode, went in there like the Alexander the Great, like the Ptolemies, and just conquered it and put our own people in there and just made it like another American empire.
You can't. You can't any longer because most of your soldiers today are Black and Hispanics. And if you invade a country, Black and Hispanic guys will die, and the Black Lives Matter will demonstrate in Washington, D.C., and they will storm the Capitol, and you'll be over. America is completely decadent today. Nobody's willing to die for any ideas any longer in America, except some exceptional Christian Republican women that are going after Google right now, which I love. But except for that, nobody really is interested in freedom America because you're not willing to die. And it's very Nietzschean here. But if you're not willing to die for your causes or for your family even, you cannot fight for freedom anywhere, and you cannot even fight for your own imperial power. I think it is a deeply dysfunctional empire. Gladly, I think China is the same, because I think China is way weaker than people think.
So is this like the Nietzschean master-slave morality? If we're talking about America going to the slave morality where we're not willing to die, rather we would succumb to whatever is happening to us. And I think that may be the case as well. But Arash, what do you make of this?
Definitely don't agree with the Black Lives Matter part, but I would say that historically the U.S. fights wars that are in its own best interest. It's not about, the fighting for the freedom of others. It's rarely been about that. It's been about geopolitical. It's about consolidation of geopolitical power and those types of things, controlling resources, controlling oil and such.
But sorry, go ahead.
And you know, like any empire, it's flawed, right? I mean, most people don't want to be bombed by a foreign power. Most people want to lead their own revolutions and don't want, you know, puppet regimes, which the U.S. has a whole long history of instilling throughout the world. And that builds resentment, and that builds you know, long-term problems for any empire, really. I mean, you look at the history of any empire, and I think it repeats itself.
Were the Mughals resented in India, though? Like, if we're talking about empires who had occupants that were not of, let's say, the same color of skin or whatever faculty there, like, if we look through history, there's all kinds of examples of empires.
No, but wait a second. Wait a second.
Yeah,
wait a second. Okay, let me correct you here. The Mughals did not run India. They were just formally running it, like the Swedish monarch who doesn't even vote, right? They have very little influence. And look at the Mongol Empire, for example. They were bloody like hell and murdered and burned libraries and destroyed most of history, especially Iran. But at the end of the day, when the Mongols, once they run their empires, they had a 5% tax rate for everything, and they left everybody to run their own business in their own communities. They were actually popular. And if it hadn't been for the plague, we could have had the Mongol Empire for hundreds of years. So it's all about whether an empire invades and constructs an empire with power sharing installed from the very beginning. The Persian empires, four of them, lasted for over 2,200 years. The empire lasted for 6 years and then imploded because the Egyptian one was very much Xi Jinping. It was a dictatorship, it was Akhenaten worshiping the sun. Whereas the Persians installed their first empire by power sharing structures. And by the power sharing structures, especially separating priest and chief, or priest and king, if you like, you get a much more sustainable system over time because it actually includes decentralization. This is the great thing with the United States. The reason it was kept together for as long as it has was because of the Constitution. But the problem with the United States today is because you don't trust each other in America and you take each other to court all the time and you don't even know what trust is. You work your asses off to be on a level with the Europeans where people trust their neighbors much more than you do. And the Japanese trust their neighbors much more than you do in America. You cannot have a country any longer that goes out there in the world and offers its own sons in a war. You got to study the previous empires if you're going to run one. My suggestion, though, is that I prefer the Middle Ages. I prefer Renaissances. I prefer smaller units. This is where I'm with Arash. I think anarchism is the way to go today. And I think we should split up these empires without them causing too much havoc in the world. Russia will certainly fall apart in the next 10 years. As soon as Putin dies, it's over. And hopefully not too violently, but go into the mode of being smaller units. And smaller units can cause less destruction.